Sex abuse allegations against priests. Today, a Jesuit order released the names of 42 Jesuits with credible allegations of sexual abuse of a minor. David Gonzalez is in Southwest Houston tonight with the details. David?
Len, yeah, many of those allegations taking place years or even decades after the alleged incidents took place, and some have former ties right here to Houston, involving also some former teachers and also leaders at Strake Jesuit. The storm that the church experiences today calls forth from us an unprecedented and yet needed response. Those are the first words the head of the Jesuit Central and Southern Province used to describe allegations of sex abuse by former Jesuits. The province names 42 Jesuits as having credible allegations of sexual abuse of a minor. 5 of those people, Jody Blanchard, Thomas Naughton, Vincent Orlando, Charles Coyle, and Edward DeRossi, all worked at Strake Jesuit, and all are accused at least once of sexual abuse between the 1960s and the 1980s. Coyle, Naughton, and DeRossi have since died. We aren't sure on Blanchard's location. Orlando, who was once the principal at Strake Jesuit, is still a member of the Jesuit Central and Southern Province. Officials say he works under restricted ministry and lives under supervision. A former priest at St. Joseph's Church is also named for alleged abuse in the 1960s. He died in 2013. The church has no comment. And just a few minutes ago, actually, Strake Jesuit just issued us a statement, and in part the school officials say that they hope this information will promote trust and also healing through greater transparency. And they also go on to say that their greatest and most important thing is, of course, their students. Mia and Len.
All right, David Gonzalez reporting. Thank you.